Welcome to the Sisterhood of Sweat. I am here today with Susie Pettit. Susie Pettit has been helping women live lives they love for over 10 years. She is the host of the podcast Love Your Life Show and owner of the wellness company Strength, Mind, and Body, LLC. She is a certified life and wellness coach and a mom of 5 sons, ages 17 to 25. Susie is passionate about helping women live lives that feel as good on the inside as they look on the outside. She spent more than half of her life living a life she did not love as a people pleaser and codependent perfectionist. She reflects that it is as if she was trying to win an award for Martyr of the Year. Luckily, she hit rock bottom and now has the breadth of experience to teach firsthand about setting healthy boundaries, beating your inner critic, conscious parenting, and how to use mindfulness-based tools to beat overwhelm and anxiety. She uses 2 foundational frameworks, her 5 pillars of wellness and her thought model. Today, we talked about people pleasing, boundaries, manuals, that we each come with a manual of what we're supposed to do and not do. No, we don't really, but it's like we have one. Codependency, what it is, what it isn't, how you can tell if you are having these codependency kind of signs. The people pleasing, how to tell if you are a people pleaser. And she really gives us the roadmap on how to set better boundaries and recognize when we are falling into codependency and people pleasing. This was an amazing episode. I wish I could have been on another hour. I would love to spend more time with Susie. She's hilarious. I love her whole attitude, the way she presents. And there was so much, I want to say, meat and potatoes in this podcast, though. We are eating veggies and lean meats. But I just really want you guys to tune in, take notes, and let me know what your takeaways were. I am so excited to welcome the one, the only Susie Pettit to the show today. Welcome.
Thank you, Linda. I am so thrilled to be here.
Oh my gosh. This is going to be such a great topic for everyone today. We are going to talk about setting better boundaries, overcoming our people-pleasing tendencies, also codependency, if you're feeling like you have to fix everything and everybody, or you have to take care of it. You feel all the emotions in the room. This is for you today. Susie, take it away. Let's start with, how did you even get into this whole space to be the person to talk about this?
Well, it's our life. I don't know, where do you want to start? I'm 50 years old and I was raised in, by 2 well-meaning parents, but in a boundary-less, codependent mess of a household, really. I really can look to my past with a lot of understanding for how I became who I am now. I was the oldest of 3 sisters, and my mom was a stay-at-home mom, and my dad was a very very controlling. I now see him as, sort of a scared man who really gave us the message that we were not good enough as we were. A message I heard consistently when I was growing up was that I should have been a boy, that boys are better, that you need to be different than what I am. And so I really started from a very young age trying to be something. It's almost like I was starting broken, it's something I couldn't do anything.
You're and like, then, I'll be better, I'll try.
Right. how do I shift? And so my experience, while maybe not everyone got that message from the people they were raised by, my experience is in no ways unique, because very much as girls in the society, we get that message where it's like, be the good girl, be the, don't rock the boat, do what other people want you to do. And we start at a very young age looking outward and externally for approval. It's really, studies have shown it's around age 8 or 9 when we stop looking internally to our own guidance and we start thinking like, oh, well, what does dad say? What does mom say? What does the teacher say? What does the friend, and some of that is normal development in terms of, we go through a stage of individuation. But as girls in this society, we very much are conditioned to become these people pleasers, really, to sort of put your needs on, like, your needs are too much, your needs are, don't rock the boat. I remember my mom, we went out with the 5 of us, we went out to like someplace, and it was so awesome because we got to choose cookies. And I remember as a kid, I was like before the display case, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is so great. And I saw my chocolate chip cookie and I ordered it. And then we went back and sat down and I opened mine and it was oatmeal raisin. And I was like, oh, and so I think I was halfway out of my chair and my mom and dad were like, Susie, stop, like, what are you doing? And I was like, I'm going to go get my cookie. I'm going to go tell the woman whose job it is to fulfill my order that, hey, she made a mistake. And they were like, oh no, like, sit down, you're fine. Like, and that message, while so small, and again, I'm not trying to shame or blame my parents. I by no means I've never met a parent that is like, I'm going to screw up my kid. It's more this, we're all trying to do the best we can. And my parents were certainly trying to do the best they could. But that message of, your needs are below this absolute strain. Like, don't make her uncomfortable that she misplaced your order. Sit down and eat your friggin' oatmeal raisin cookie, which then I know, which I did. and actually probably felt some shame around even wanting differently, which then, led me into my 20s and 30s of being a really good people pleaser and living a life that other people wanted of me, really not stopping and checking in with myself in terms of, what does Susie want? What does Susie like? It was more this, like, okay, this is what you're supposed to do, and go to high school and be this high achiever, and then go to college and get the husband and and it was around age, 34, 35. One of my dear friends who was living sort of a parallel life as me was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer. And she, over the course of 2 years, passed. And I was one of her main caregivers. And it was really an eye-opening experience of, hold on, this could end any day. And what am I doing here? And like, we had gotten together, before her diagnosis with our young kids and complained about the same things. Like, the words coming out of her mouth could have been the words coming out of my mouth, like about our husbands and our kids and our this and our that. And then her death was this like, oh my gosh, well, do something about it, honey. Like, come on. And that was the catapult for me to begin to look into some of this work and to move away from that sort of people pleaser and doing what everyone else wanted to do, which I also call a people deceiver, because those people didn't know that I was being fake. My first husband didn't know that I didn't like what, when he says, like, you want to go to a Chinese restaurant? And I say, yes, because I've been taught to do what the man says. And, women are like, he doesn't know that I don't want to go to a Chinese restaurant because I didn't open my mouth. So I started to open my mouth and I started to speak up. I call her my inner warrior. Like, I started to have my little warrior come up and start saying things. And that definitely changed the course of my life. So in terms of a longer answer to your question of how I got to be doing what I'm doing, it's really that I lived a life that was not my own, that was based on other people's rules and other people's ideas of what my life should be like for, the most part of my life. And then had, I call it a midlife awakening. It was this, like, an alarm clock went off that was like, wait a minute, honey, like, you're unique. You have needs, you have desires. They're here for a reason. It's okay.
Yeah, I think that generation was all about it's selfish to have self-care. Everybody else's needs have to be met before yours. you should be eating, if you make toast and it's burnt, that's your toast, or you eat, you eat the crumbs while everybody else gets the good stuff. And I think that it translates into a lot of areas in our life. And I was just laughing when you were telling me the cookie story, because
Right?
I was at Miss Fitness USA, and I'm with this girl named Tiaja, and we're sitting ordering. I didn't get my salsa that I ordered,
Yeah.
and she did not get the grilled cheese she ordered. She literally, I think they brought it back. She was over the top 6 or 7 times, one time without cheese. And she kept sending it back until it was right.
Yeah.
And she sent my pico de gallo. She sent that back and got me salsa. But it was like, I didn't want to say anything because I was just like, it's not that important. But it is that coaching of being so like the good girl, being polite, not wanting to put anyone out, not worrying about our feelings, but always other people's feelings. This whole people pleasing thing, but it can really be to our own detriment. So how did you see that? And how did you start walking out of this whole like gamut of my needs aren't important, everybody else is above?
Yeah, well, it started by speaking up to like the waiter, in little steps, I guess is how it starts. Because if I look at my life now, 15 years later, where I have no problem saying to my husband, yeah, that doesn't work for me, and not feeling that, like clench of my nervous system shutting down. I know that I've come a long way, but it starts when I work with women and how to start moving out of this people pleasing behavior, or, starting to set boundaries and asking for what we want. I say, start with the waiter, literally, is like one of the things I say, like, start with those easier relationships that you can say, hey, you know what? I ordered the salsa. And there's a difference between, like, boundaries get a bad rap because we think like, oh, you have to be bitchy to be, to set a boundary. But it's really, what happens is that we were at such a level and a limit that we've been pushed to the extreme that then we finally speak up for ourselves. It does come out in that more like hard way. But if we start with the small ways, we can ask in kind, hey, you know what? I ordered the salsa, or I ordered the pico de gallo, or I ordered the guacamole. Could you please? And then it's also noticing these little thoughts. Like you said, it really doesn't matter. And yes, like it is all about picking our battles. But I always like to pull out like those thoughts that are like, it really doesn't matter, is saying like, your needs don't matter over some, like if you're like, actually, I'm fine with the pico de gallo, that's just as good as the guacamole, then okay. But if it's that like, oh, I don't want to, like the thoughts are sort of coming from two different emotional pools. And that's what we want to get into, that this retraining our brain that it does matter, that it's not too small. There's so much along with this people pleasing, raising us all as, just don't rock the boat type girls. There's also this whole movement, like, don't be high maintenance. Like, okay, no, it's okay. It's all good here. Like, don't worry. Like, just this sort of like, don't worry about me. I'm all good. It's all fine. I'll just lay away and get and I am like, that's another whole area to just sort of be like, I am high maintenance. Like, it takes maintenance. Like, all of us can be. Like, it's not this selfish. It's not me above others. It's me and others. And if others are taking care of themselves and I'm taking care of myself, well, then there you go. That's sort of where the codependency comes in, that we're like, we're not taking care of ourselves. And then we're with people who aren't taking care of themselves. And then we're over functioning for them, and then getting pissy and, exhausted. And then they're under functioning. And it's just this whole mess of relationship that doesn't help any of us.
So let's hop into that a little bit. The over-functioning codependent that sees everyone's feelings, because you may be like, for me, I grew up that way, having to manage a dysfunctional kind of things going on in my household. And anybody listening they've heard my story on the show quite a bit, but So you're managing all this dysfunction. And so for me, I think I always want everyone to be happy. So if I feel any because my mom was very suicidal. So if I feel anyone's emotions and they're not happy, I'm always trying to help make them happy, fix it, just help them however I can. And so I see that as, I see the codependency. I see the people pleasing so much. I see the lack of boundaries. I see all of this. And I would go as far as to say, recently I was reading a book called Boundaries, and it really opened my eyes to a few things. I was sexually molested when I was 8.
I'm sorry.
And that was never really dealt with. It was swept under the rug because that's what you did back in that generation. But it was a close family member. And this book really was eye-opening to me. It was that boundaries start at your skin. And I had been so violated that I didn't recognize that, it's so deep, but I didn't recognize that myself was, like, nobody should be crossing over that line, and that I had full rights to protect that. And I think it just, what they say is that people that's happened to, if you've been abused, sexually molested, that you have a hard struggle then because of that, and not being able to set boundaries. So with all of that, I am getting so much better though, now that I've brought awareness to understanding why I may do what I do, that as a protection.
Oh, for sure. I mean, boundaries are a form of protection. And I really want to circle back to how you're saying you start with awareness. And I also say compassion, because I think that when we are raised in these sort of this conditioning, to have a goal that we would be rid of codependency or people pleasing is really unrealistic and unfair to us. It's more, I like sort of being like in the balcony of my life and being like, oh, there it is. Okay. I was a little codependent today with my son, or I was a little codependent with my husband. And when I'm in that curious, aware place, that allows me the flexibility to be like, to learn, and versus just like, oh my God, there you go again. You're awful. But yes, to your point, I define boundaries as sort of synonymous with guidelines for how I want to be treated, for how I allow people to treat me. So it's, if someone is yelling, I'm not telling them what to do. Like, someone's yelling, they can yell all they want, but I don't allow people to yell at me. So if you continue to yell, I will leave the room. If you continue to yell, I will hang up the phone. If you could, and it's in this clearer place of I'm not judging them or saying, what they could, or like, they can continue to yell. There will be consequences in our relationship, but you're firm, but you're in control. Yeah. It's a clear guideline with a follow through. And I also, I understand, the idea that boundaries goes up to your skin. I also, especially with your group, consider a whole bunch of internal boundaries that we have. I find that sometimes women are able to start working with these boundaries to say, it's not okay to swear at me, or it's not, like, that's a guideline. I don't allow strangers to swear at me. So why would I allow, like sort of starting these guidelines and these boundaries. And yet we also have internal boundaries that are almost harder for us to keep, in terms of, I get up when I say I'm going to get up, or I exercise when I say I'm going to take my needs importantly. I'm not, when I say that I'm going to eat salad for lunch, and the child part of my brain is like, no, you want Snickers. It's like, hold on, let's remember why I made, that it might be easier in the moment to have the Snickers, but we're looking at the long-term, adult part of our brain. It might be easier in the moment to not tell that person, to not speak up when someone's yelling or swearing at us, but we're looking for these long-term, the long-termers. That's why I say healthy boundaries make healthy relationships with ourselves and others, that it's doing sort of the hard in the short term so that the long term is easier.
So don't you have to do the work to realize you're worthy of these boundaries? Because I think many women do not see that they are worthy of having these parameters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that they go back to what you said in the beginning, that they're selfish for, speaking up or for saying, I was coaching a woman earlier today who was saying, well, she slept in the basement again because her husband was up and watching TV in the room. And it's like, okay, so could you, like, how else could this go? Maybe
Apartment
saying,
B.
right, like, hey, there are two of us in this relationship. I like to get up early to exercise and go to bed around 10. Like, if you're going to be watching TV, could you do it in the other room? Or could you do it in another room on weekdays? Or could you, it's just keep having us be more equal, not this like one up, one down relationship.
I think for that relationship, see, I'm going to be the fixer, but
yeah,
the TV needs to be out of the bedroom.
right. But see, then you're like getting into his business. So it's more this like, if I'm going to be in a relationship with you, and I said, to start with I like sleeping with you. I like sleeping in the same room with you, but I choose to get up, she's choosing to get up in the morning to exercise. It's like he's choosing to watch TV. So it's not getting into the like who's right or who's wrong.
Right.
It's like, hold on, we're both in this. Do we want this relationship? Well, let's have some clear communication. Is helpful.
I love that. Yeah, so good.
Another part that I want to bring up on the boundaries and the codependency that you spoke of is that so much of it, yes, women and their worth. And I again, sort of like codependency, I think that is something that we can consistently work on, loving ourselves more and more. Like, I do not think that there's too much love of ourselves that we can pour on ourselves. I would imagine that most everyone listening to the show is not a narcissist. So just love on yourself. Like, that in itself is a path of growth that we probably will be on our whole life. The part of codependency, that some of our knowledge from the very early days of schooling that's a little twisted is just this lack of understanding that the circumstances in our lives, like the things happening in our lives, do not cause us or anyone else to feel a certain way. So me playing music loud in the house does not make my dad angry, or you doing something or saying something does not make your mom feel suicidal. There's a thought line in between there. And that's where we get confused, that me playing music in the house, my dad might have the thought, that's so disrespectful, I'm trying to do my work, and feel annoyed. Or me playing music in the house, my dad might be like, wow, Susie sounds like she really likes that band. That's cool. And he might be like enthused and comforted that he has such a free-willed thought. Like, it is his thought that creates the feeling. And we skip that. And so then we very much can move into these codependency behaviors. And it often starts in the youth when we are told things like, don't say that, you'll make your mom, feel suicidal. Don't do this, you'll make him, or even like in preschool, it's like, don't take the crayons, you'll make Johnny cry. Like, no, Johnny's thoughts make him cry. Thanks. Okay. Johnny might be thrilled that you took the crayon so he can go out to recess a little earlier. Like, it's not the crayons. It's not the crayons. And that's where some of this understanding can really be helpful, that I might say something and my husband might have thoughts that are like, wow, that was really rude of Susie to say. And then he feels hurt. Or he might have thoughts of, wow, that was really honest of Susie to say, and feel comforted that we have a close relationship. It's this sort of slowing down the whole, that things happen and then we think, feel, act. So it's things don't happen and we feel immediately. Like science, if they're looking at your brain and you're on a scan, you have a thought that looks like lightning. So the thought comes first and then it rains down a feeling of emotion. And so when we're feeling that emotion, it came from our thought. So sometimes we're so fast in these programs and pattern behaviors that's another whole, so I'm not discounting that we have traumatic responses. And I mean, I do too. So, but it's more when it comes to codependency, our thoughts and experiences around other people's feeling states it can be really, really challenging. I have 5 sons. So if I took on the responsibility of their feeling states and their happiness, that's a lot of pressure for me. I'm always saying codependency sucks, like for both parties. Because if say my son comes home from school today and he says, I failed my science test, I'm so upset. I, as a mom, am like, oh my God, son upset, alarm. Like, what do we do?
You want to fix it.
Right. I might go into fix it mode. Like, oh, well, what should we, should we call the teacher? Do you want some ice cream? Do you like, what do we, maybe I'll say something like, don't worry, I'm sure it's not that big a deal. None of that is helping my son. That's all helping me manage my feeling state. So instead, it's like, I need to manage my feeling state. Son is upset. This is okay. Son is a human. Humans have feelings. This is not mine to fix. It's a thought that I think often. And then I can be more able to be there for my son and be like, ooh, tell me about it. Sounds hard. Okay. And then he's able to have his emotional
experience. Has to fix it himself.
Right. Because otherwise, if I come in and I'm like, oh, okay. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. This is awful. This is so horrendous. And the kid is like, I know, what do I do? And I'm like, well, it's not that bad. And he's feeling it. So first of all, he like may not feel heard, like, but mom, it does suck. It sucks for me right here, right now. And you're discounting that. Or if I go in to fix it, I'm like, well, let's, call the teacher and see if there are makeup times. That's a hit to his confidence. He's like, unconsciously thinking, well, mom thinks I can't handle it. And then we're breeding that sort of under functioner for future generations of like, I don't know what to do. You need to take care of it.
Right. We don't want to enable the dysfunction of them not being capable to do something. Like they get used to you fixing it, then they won't try to fix it and realize they can fix it. Right.
Yeah, it can be because they're used to it, or maybe we come in, I know certainly when I was a younger mother, I would make my kids feel incompetent. Like I would say, why don't you do, whatever. And then they do it wrong because it's their first time doing it. And then I would swoop in and fix everything and not giving them that sort of learning curve, which is some of what I say, with life. It's like, let it be messy first. If you're working on boundaries and you're feeling overworked and overstressed and you want your partner to pick up more of sort of the labor in the household, whether it's the emotional labor, and you're like, okay, you're going to take over, teacher gifts for this, then you need to just back the heck out and let him think or her think that, a flower picked from your garden is a fine gift. And it's like, it's releasing responsibility for this stuff. And releasing, that's the discomfort that I find is, women feel. It's that like, say that you're having the family over for dinner and you're just fried and you're like, okay, can you take over the setting of the table? And then you sit down and the table, it's like, there are no forks. Where are the napkins? Oh, they're in the bag and the cat. Like, okay. And it's just sitting there. Like, yeah, this isn't on me. This is not my responsibility. I'm not like the only, I always say like the circus director, like I don't need to control everything, but it feels uncomfortable.
Oh my gosh. You're so preaching to the choir this morning. And I just remember we had click lists because it's been pandemic and my husband was that was what his responsibility was going to be, that he was going to do the click list. He put it off too long to where the click items didn't all come. Yeah. And we always have traditionally this big Christmas breakfast and eggs are a part and other things that you would have for breakfast. And he didn't want to go to the store. And I was up to my eyeballs in, of course, people pleasing. I was baking my little wazoo off and making sure everybody all the way to Uncle Mark had their favorites. And so I'm looking at that, believe me. And
well, because you just said an important thing. You're like, he doesn't want to go to the store. And then, but it's like, neither do you. And this was his job. So
okay.
That's sort of it. It's like
in my mind, I said to myself, if we don't, I guess we're not going to have eggs. No.
Perfect.
Because I was just like, no, to my
perfect. Bag. And then you're like, oh, there aren't eggs. Ask him. So funny. Like it's not your, and when your mother-in-law is like, well, I always have eggs for Christmas. You're like, well, isn't that how you raised your son then?
Oh my gosh. And so many things, like it would be, I would try to be getting out of something and it would be, my brother would be like, oh, but I love the fudge and the this and the that, and we can't skip this and that. And so then I'd be right back. And so this time I did not ask permission.
Oh, good for you.
No, I just did what I wanted to do.
Mhm.
And so I started realizing he doesn't make all that stuff. Why should I?
Right. He can do it. I mean, that's part of like so much of boundaries and codependency goes along with our expectations in relationships and something I call manuals. Like I think of, like the sort of manual that you would get if you're putting together a dresser or something, like this, like how it should be. I think that we hold manuals for different relationships in our life. Like your brother holds a manual that my sister should make the fudge, and your mother-in-law holds a manual that you should have eggs for Christmas. And
My
and
sister
it's
should do everything is the
right.
manual.
And we might hold a manual, like a good wife does this, or a good girl does, and we
I
just need
love
to burn
that.
those manuals. They
That
do
is
us,
so
they're
good.
just full of expectations and drama. And I'm always like my kids will say something like, well, so-and-so's mom is doing this. I'm like, yeah, and I'm the mom you've got. So like, I'm doing the best I can. And what are you going to do with me? Because I don't do that. Like, it's like, I'll, whatever. But it's throwing out those manuals and expectations that get us into this, like this guilt and shame cycle of feeling bad. Like, oh, I didn't do the fudge. And then shame. Who am I? Why didn't I stay up late and do it? It's like, no, it's unhelpful for us, and unhelpful for our relationships.
Oh my gosh. And I just remember it was so funny because my husband came home and he's like, what? You seem a little mad because he didn't want to go to get what. And I looked at him and he said, you said you want to relax. I want to relax. I've been going strong since like whatever time in the morning. And then he laughed and he got it.
Yeah.
And he went to the store and got whatever. But I think, I love the thing about the manual that is so crystal clear for people. I'm sure.
I just want to circle back to you did an important thing. You spoke up for yourself. So a lot of what we do is, he's like, you seem mad. You could have been like, oh no, I'm fine. I'm fine. And you're like slamming stuff around the kitchen. Everything's fine here. But you said, no, I want to relax too. And this is where it causes us to be a little vulnerable in relationships. So we need to ask for what we want. That it's yeah, you know what? I want to relax too. Yeah. And it would help me a lot if you went to the store, or, I wanted eggs too, but that's not on my job of list to do. But so you spoke up for yourself, and then you change the dynamics. It feels uncomfortable in the moment. Like when you go back and you get the chocolate chip cookie over the oatmeal raisin cookie, that would have felt uncomfortable, but we can do it in kind ways. Like you weren't like, swear, I don't want to relax too.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And everybody pitched in after that. Even my youngest son started pitching in when they heard the actual truth of where I was at and what I had been doing. And I was just like, Betty Crocker's tired,
Well, and that's the people pleaser. That's why I call it sometimes the people deceiver. Because if we're there, like everything's fine. Oh, I'll make the quiche and the dessert and and it's like everything, that's the people pleaser, but we're actually deceiving those people. And once they hear the truth and, they're like, oh, okay. And it's sort of expecting the best of people. And if they are not going to go along, like if he's like, that's like, if we don't speak up, there's no path forward. When we do speak up, it could, it often goes one of two ways. The person is like, okay, great, or no. I mean, with my father, that was something I said, that if you keep yelling, I'm going to hang up the phone. If you keep swearing, and he kept yelling, and he still, but I just, I'm not in relationship with him in that way. And so it is,
I love
like, that's the hard part, is that people, can choose to continue to be them, which they always were in the first place, but we're not resisting it, or we're not taking on sort of the brunt of it, the pain of whomever, them acting the way that we're like, yeah, okay, you can keep doing that. And I matter too.
Right. And I think it's really hard for people when they first begin, to realize what the freedom is on the other side because I have started doing it like a boss, but and you still probably don't even recognize at that point all the boundaries you're not setting.
Yeah.
But when you start becoming more aware and you start doing it, the first few times when you set a boundary with someone that's used to crossing over, you're going to get pushed back. And you
Yeah.
have to totally expect it and just be like, I'm setting the parameter. I'm going to
Mhm.
say it up front. I'm going to honor my own boundaries if somebody tries to cross over them.
Mhm.
And at the end of the night, you're going to feel like a winner. You're going to feel so good once you've set that boundary and you held your own boundaries.
Mhm.
You're going to want, it's addicting, because then you're going to want to set more, because you're going to see how empowering it is.
It is. And so you speak to a couple of interesting points. So one is that like you get started just by getting started, and that it may be messy, and it might be, like the words might come out and you're like, what just happened? But I said it, and oh my gosh, so that it's really important to just start wherever you are with wherever you can, with whatever it is that you're saying. And that's okay. The other part of it is that when you start speaking up in these old relationships that have a certain way of being and interacting, it's as if you guys were in a dance and you're suddenly changing the dance moves. So initially, that person might be like, whoa, I go left and you didn't go left this time, what's going on? Or hold on. And it is really helpful for women and for your listeners that when they're in these sort of beginning boundary stages, to lean on sort of the groups that you offer and the different communities, like whether it's Facebook or Instagram, or to look for that support of like, you're not doing anything wrong. It's okay. Of course, this feels hard, because you're saying that afterwards you feel great, but you definitely, it's sort of like a good workout. Like you might not want to go do the workout, and beforehand you're like, oh, I don't, but you always feel better afterwards. That's the same thing with the boundary. It's that like, oh, I don't, it's that short-term discomfort that's going to feel uncomfortable. And afterwards, no matter which way it goes, whether the person is like, oh, goodbye then, or yeah, I'm in it for the long haul, you've stuck up for you. That's that internal boundary. That's like us connecting with that inner warrior, that we're no longer that people deceiver, that we're no longer letting ourselves down. And it's that like, you know what? It is okay for me to want the salsa or to not go get the eggs. But we have so much conditioned doubt in there that groups like yours and having some of that community there, sort of that fact checker, to be like, no, it's because a lot of the people out, like I wouldn't talk to, look at who you're taking advice from. Because if you're talking to your neighbors and they're in a relationship where they're pulling the whole, they're the over functioners, or they're in a codependent mess and they're telling you you're doing something wrong, it's like not so helpful to get information from them. But to lean on groups and it's this like, people that are in the ring also, and that there's nothing wrong here, and it will feel uncomfortable.
And I love what you said about people deceivers instead of people pleasers, because what she means by that is it is deceiving if you're doing these things and you really don't want to do them. In a way, it's not being authentic and being truthful and honest about where you're at with it. So it is really kind of not as nice as we think it is.
Yeah, well, you know what? It comes up a lot with codependency. And if anyone has kids, that we, like one of my little truth tellers for codependency before I start doing something is like, did he or she ask for my help with this? Like, did she ask for me to do this? Or because this is a great example of how the people deceiving can be hard for the other person. Like say that, my son says, I want to go shopping this weekend at whatever. And I'm like, okay, I'll take you. Meanwhile, in my head, I'm like, God, I have so many other things to do. And I was going to do this weekend and that. And it really would work better to do it Monday, but I don't say anything to him. And I'm a deceiver, and I'm, and I go and we do the shopping, and maybe I'm a little snippy, maybe I'm totally fine. But then later, say it comes out and I'm like, yeah, and then you had me go shopping with you, or you had me buy the eggs, or you had me make the fun. Like that often does come up in that like sort of martyr way. Like, well, yeah, I do. They're like these innocent little like, hey, I asked. You said yes. Like next time I ask, say no. It's like, I mean, that's where like interdependence is, and codependency is just complete enmeshment, thinking that if I say no to my son for shopping, he can't handle his feelings of disappointment, or maybe, like regret that he's not going to have the shirt for Monday, or that he can't problem solve and go ask someone else or ride his bike, or it's like that I'm the only solution there. And then
which is kind of almost like an ego trip.
Yeah. I mean, codependency is very much rooted in like, I'm the only one that can help. And it feels so heavy because it's like, oh my gosh, my son is anxious or my daughter is nervous and I need to fix it. It feels so heavy. And there's so much freedom that comes from like, I'm an option. Like, sure, if they're nervous, they can come talk to me, but I want them to have other tools in their toolbox so that they are not at like 25 and they're like, Mom, I'm nervous. What do I do? Or Mom, I want to buy clothes. How do I figure this out? It's like,
I love it. Yeah.
So hard.
So empowering, so much good meat in what you're saying today. And I kind of want to also mesh in this whole, because when you people please and you are codependent, well, you care about what other people think way too much. And I think I'm getting better, but I think I still care way too much about what other people think. Mm-hmm. So, and you were talking in one of your shows, I loved the whole episode about that. And your podcast again, the name?
The Love Your Life Show.
Yes, I love that. That's a great, Love Your Life. So you were talking about 3 dream stealers and just the whole idea about, some of us are afraid to do this because it's like putting a target on our back. What are people going to say? What are people going to think? Mm-hmm. Address some of that for us today.
Yeah. Yeah. So, so much of this caring what other people think, it comes from, fear of what other people are going to think, but it's also this understanding that we can't control what other people think. Like, that's why it's so codependent, is that we think that if we do certain things, like here I am, I don't know if anyone can see the video, I'm wearing like, little earrings and a scarf. And if I put this on thinking that you're going to think, like, you might look at me and be like, oh my God, cute outfit. You might look at me and be like, oh my God, she reminds me of my 8th grade art teacher. How lame. Or you might look at me and be like, I want those. I wonder, I can't control your thoughts at all. And so I need to take care of me. And that's where some of it is like just this knowledge that we can't control what people are going to think. So that's sort of the baseline. And then we look at, the different, I call them like 3 different sort of dream stealers in our lives of people that can get in there. And when we are trying to be more ourselves, or we are trying to be more authentic and less of a people pleaser, who are like, what gets in the way of that? And so the first one is just openly critical. It's the one that they don't even try to hide it. They're like, oh, really? You're going to try her workout plan? Well, you've done that so many times. So why do you think it's going to work this time? Like, it's just, it's not even passive aggressive. It's just aggressive. Like, so those are a little easier, but it's also helpful to just know that just because they say it doesn't mean it's true. Like, just because, yes, they're pointing out something you did in your past does not dictate what you're going to do with your future. Like, your action today dictates your future. And so, those openly critical people, it's helpful to look at and to just, I frankly say, don't share your dreams with those people. Like, don't tell your Aunt Sally what you're going to do if she is always, like, when people show you who they are, believe them the first time is something I say. So it's
well, I loved what you were saying about how your father was talking about how women in business, it is just isn't good. And my dad would always, when they talked about the stock market, it would be with my brother, hush, hush, hush.
Yeah.
Like, girls aren't supposed to know how to do
finances. Stocks. Yes.
And so I feel, that.
So don't go to him to talk about finances and dreams and like how you want it. Like, that's exactly right.
Right.
Like, know who you should go to. And then I also, like, I talk about in that episode, which I can send you the link to, but it's like, know who your pub squad is, like, who does pump you up, like who you should go to for that sort of evidence. I would not tell my dad any of my business dreams because I know that, of his background. And so that's that one, the openly critical. Then there's the other one that's a little sneaky. It's the one that, starts things with like, well, I wouldn't say this if I didn't love you. Or
it's for your good.
It's for your own good. And it's like, these can be people that are in your inner circle and they're afraid of you changing. And they're like, oh, but maybe you're cutting back on alcohol. And they're like, oh, but we know you need the wine to have a good time. So they're sort of feeding your brain these thoughts that are really not helpful. And if you stay around them, you're going to start to absorb those thoughts and believe them. And it's I say protect your dreams around those people, that those are definite dream stealers. that like, I love you, but, and I wouldn't say that, don't mean to insult you, but it's like, yes, you do. Why are you saying it?
When someone starts out a conversation like that,
Yeah.
it's like that Instagram meme, real thing, run, like
Yes, run. Like, yeah, no, or the no offense, but I'm like, don't say it. Like, come on. So those are people who like sort of hide their own limiting beliefs and put it on you, which sometimes we do this as a parent too. We'll say like, oh, are you sure you want to go out for that team? Remember what happened last time? That's our own mismanagement of our own feelings, but we're holding the other person back. So that's helpful to look at. The third group there is I call it our scaredy cat brain. And that is the part of our brain, it's the primitive part of our brain. It's the oldest, it's the strongest, and it is here to keep us alive. Our brain's motivation is to have us survive. It's not here to keep us happy. It's not here to evolve us to the next best level of ourselves. And so it likes to just repeat patterns that it's been shown that you've survived. So let's keep doing that. Like you've survived eating all the Twinkies. Keep doing that. You've survived in that, emotionally abusive marriage. Keep doing that. You've survived. And so and it'll throw up all these thoughts like, are you sure? And really, I don't think so. And it's, so for those bigger things, we can sort of see it, but it's also no matter when we're looking to grow. You and I, we've done a lot of work, but when we look to push it to that next level, you can rest assured your brain is going to come up with something. And when I expect it to, I can be in that sort of like kind observer place and be like, oh, is that what you got for me today, brain? Okay. Well, we're going to keep going anyway. It's just this.
Yeah. I love it. And that could be the worst one is the third one.
Yes, because you believe it. It's in your head. And I find with my brain, when I can, first of all, separate and call it something different, like my brain, or I actually call my brain Mrs. Fenton usually. Sorry if Mrs. Fenton's listening. She was a really critical English teacher I had in elementary school, and she would constantly critique like my creativity. And so now when I'm doing a podcast or a blog, or like I'll hear and I'm just like, you're not wanted right now, Miss Fenton. Like, I don't need you right now. Like, it's just recognizing just because we're thinking it doesn't mean it's true. And we have 60 to 85,000 thoughts a day. We get to choose which ones we're focusing on. And a lot of them are just automatic negative thoughts. So to just sort of wean, like, is that a thought that my dad planted in my brain, or that my mom planted in my brain, or that Mrs. Fenton planted in my, I don't need to dive into that right now. But those can be so super sneaky because we believe them.
Oh my gosh, I'm going to have to come up with a name.
Yes.
I'll have to think on that. I love that. That is such a good one right there, because I think we all have either that person or that inner critic that sits on the shoulder, and that's a great way to dust them off. And
it helps us.
So good.
It's like the backbone of mindfulness, or like, it's just sort of detaching from the like thinking that our thoughts are us, like that because we think it, we must believe it. And it's just that detachment. It's, labeling being aware, like, oh, where'd that thought come from? And just thinking like, oh, that's my dad's voice in my head, or my mom's voice in my head, or giving it a name. I know someone
it can be
Nellie. She's like, Nellie's in my head today.
Yeah.
Your nervous Nellie, very anxious. I'm like, Nellie's talking loud today. And it might sound like you're schizo, but anyone who knows cognitive thought or like therapists are gonna be like, no, you keep at it. Like that's a really helpful, healthy way to manage our emotional and mental health, to not attach to every dumb thought we think.
And we had this exercise at the Institute of Integrative Nutrition, and Joshua Rosenthal, he had us do it. And it was, our homework was to be bad, to do something bad. I think it was at least 1 to 3 things.
Oh,
and for a good girl.
Oh, I like it.
Yeah. And so I did things that were way out of character that I would never, ever do. And actually it was kind of fun because people were like, but it was, it was eye-opening.
Yeah.
It was eye-opening. And I was like,
well, all that,
you should not always color in the lines.
Yeah, when you do something, all those thoughts that then come up would be completely eye-opening. Yeah,
it was. Yeah,
and then just being in that kind place to watch it, like, oh, look at that. I'm judging myself for, that's so interesting.
It is so interesting. And I think it is a way to kind of break out of that whole over the top good girl scenario which we do to ourselves.
Yeah.
First it was done
because, and this is a great place because it all comes back to that worth. And I think if people could just think of one thing, I think of being like a detective, a curious detective over a critical judge. So we so often are like judging ourselves, or like that there even is a bad and a good. Is like it's being this like really restrictive and not good enough, and it's coming from our worth, and versus this open, curious, like, oh, let me see why you did that, Susie, or let me see why you chose that, Linda, or let me see. It's just this open, like just receptivity of who we are. Like, we're humans. We have a human brain. Half of the time we're going to be mismanaged, making crazy decisions. And it's like, all right, tomorrow I'll try a little better. But today, that's what I got.
I think we judge ourselves way too harshly.
Yes. And I think that's where the magic is to just let that go. Like, it is what it is. We are who we are. It's not about being complacent and like, all right, well then I'm just going to be a biatch. It's like, no, I can act on that. But when I am, or when I act unskillfully, that's exactly what it is. It's just unskillful in the moment. And when I'll do better tomorrow.
So for the listeners today, what would be signs of being, because I don't think everybody can spot it within themselves, of being codependent and people pleasing?
I think when we are overly annoyed or frustrated with the other people in our lives, that's a good sign. Like, that's always sort of a warning flag that boundaries are definitely needed. Like if the feeling of annoyed or frustrated, and then codependency, it's really this heaviness and feeling overly invested with other people's emotional states. Like, we can be, my son comes home and did fail his science test. I can be like empathetic and I can pour love on him. But the difference between codependency and interdependency is what I call this lovingly detached. Like, I am, in fact, I call it fiercely committed, lovingly detached. Like, I am fiercely committed to my son and all my sons. And yet I need to be lovingly detached. It's not, it's this stress, this feeling.
Not your job to fix everything.
Yeah. Responsibility, like feeling so responsible for things, is another sign of codependency. And it's just like free. It's not to judge yourself. It's just to be like, hey, okay, this is something I can work on. I'll listen to some more of Linda's podcasts. I'll listen to some of Susie's podcasts. There's work here that I can do to feel better. And it's for everyone. Like, we think the person who is in that over functioning or the codependency place often thinks they're, helping the other people. But studies show, that's where we have a lot more anxious and less confident kids right now, because we've moved into this stage of parenting that's much more codependent. And it's not our fault. We don't know any better. So it's to be kind to yourself and then to start shifting out of it.
And I think even like if you are a boss or a CEO, or you are the CEO of your household, you have to look at, what activities could I, if you're overwhelmed and you're feeling annoyed and you're feeling frustrated, what activities could I release to somebody else? They could do them. I don't have to be the one. I don't have to be the one that does everything, right?
Yeah, I have people, I put them on a 24-hour diet of yes. I say you need to wait 24 hours before you say yes to anything. Like, if people are asking and it's this like, oh my God, I got to do it all. I got to say yes. It's like saying, like, I can't say yes for 20. So I'm sorry, I'll need to get back to you tomorrow. Or, I need to look, I will say, I'm on a 24-hour, I'm practicing not saying yes for 24 hours, like whatever it is. And if the person needs an answer in that moment, that's easy. No. Like, if they're like, can you make all the cupcakes for the entire 4th grade? It's like, I can't answer you right now. I'll get back, your people pleasers like, yes, I need to help. And then instead it's like, I'll get back to you tomorrow. And they're like, no, we need an answer today. You're like, well, my answer then is no. But
then you're a person that's like, the fear of, oh, they're going to judge me because they know I'm a stay-at-home mom.
Yeah.
They work. I've got to make the cupcakes. No, you don't.
No, you don't. And they very well might judge you. And yet we're always going to be judged. that's another part. There will, like, that's just in our human DNA. You know, we can look at it, we can try not to judge other people for sure. But like as cave women, we had to know who was faster than us, who was slower, like who's dumber, who's going to eat the poison berries. Like, and so there's some of that. And it's like, okay, someone is always going to judge me, but I don't want to judge myself. I don't want to be like, Susie, what the heck? Why did you know, okay. So she thinks that I'm a stay-at-home mom and I should have made all the cupcakes. She can think that. I would choose a
Let her
different
think
thought.
it.
It's like,
So let them, right? Oh my gosh, this has been so good today. I have enjoyed it. I feel like I could have another one with you.
I know, it's so good. I love talking this because this is all stuff us women. It's like, oh, let's just like, I wish we could like pull these like programming out of our brain, but we start with the little steps by speaking up in little ways, just making small shifts. I always say small hinges move big doors. Like if you look at your doors behind there, like small little hinges, and those small little actions, like saying to your husband, you know what, I want to have fun too. Like I want to relax too. It's a small little thing. And that can start making some big shifts. So that's where I would start.
That is so good. And recently I learned that because I started running since I've had a few injuries. I started back, some serious injuries, running, and I just did what I could do. And then I was like, since Christmas, I've done this amount of miles. And I was like, I should track and see how far that was. It was to Canada from Ohio.
Wow.
And so small
It does.
hinges do move big doors.
big
And that's
doors,
an
for sure.
example right there, is that you don't know what you're doing. You don't realize how these small actions
It does
really
not have to be a big thing. It's like,
Yeah.
actually, I don't want to go to the sports store today. I can go Monday. And that feels big to your system. And it's like,
so
making
good.
big shifts.
I've loved this. So tell everybody about your warrior group and where they can find you online.
Well, this has me thinking, if there are any parents out there, I have an awesome all online, all at their own pace parenting class, which is smbwell.com/parenting. Yeah, parenting with ing, which if they have kids 10 to 25, that's what it hits, not 10 and younger, but this 10 to 25 sweet spot of helping our kids be less anxious and helping parents feel less codependent. And then I have the Love Your Life show, which is my podcast, which is I put out every week to help women live lives that they love. Because as I told you earlier in the episode, I spent way too many years not like living a life that I didn't love. And I run a membership I call us our midlife warriors. So we do a lot of the thought work. I know you do a lot of the exercise. We do the like get in there, and that's a great place for if you're identify as a woman and you're over 40, where we have live coaching every week. Tonight at 7 I'm meeting my group, and I know, we work on boundaries and we talk about these small actions, and we get that support from the group, and we get the, okay, you can do it. And, we're all in there and being our best selves and taking these small steps to move forward, and also feeling the support from others when we're scared and feeling like we're doing something wrong, even though we're not. We're just moving against our conditioning. So it's smbwell.com/membership.
And I'm sure this has been eye-opening for a lot of my listeners today. And just know that between Susie and I, you can Instagram us, you can DM us, and there is support there for you.
Yeah,
and
we
Susie
want you to
even
feel
has
better.
a group all about it. So
yeah. Women supporting women.
Yes, absolutely. Make sure to reach out and let us know how you enjoyed this episode. And as always, keep on keeping on. Bye, everyone.
Bye.